So LaxCon coming up on Friday and Saturday. We bring in Jessy Morgan now at Garrison Forest, the athletic director there and head coach as well, former George Mason coach too. So she's done it all. She's been there. She's done that. And you're talking about defensive basics for your presentation. Jessy, thanks for coming on. Tell us, give us a little preview of what you're going to be talking about this year.
My preview is going to be, I'm going to give tips and tricks that I've learned along the way in my career, my coaching career, my playing career, to help kind of beginner to advanced level coaches get something more out of their players. You know, any trick or tip I have, I'm going to share. Give us
maybe one little nugget that you have that can maybe separate or even just make, the defense better. Is it an individual thing, or maybe I'll start there. Is it more of an individualistic thing defensive-wise, or are you talking team-wise that might make the difference?
I speak to both. I mean, I recognize that, to me, lacrosse is like one of those sports. It's the ultimate team game, but individuals can absolutely have an impact on a team, and a defensive individual can have an impact in terms of, really locking down their player, or, you have a vacuum cleaner out there that can get up every ground ball. So I'm going to talk about just percentages, data-driven analytics. That's kind of where I am. I'm a little nerdy. I don't think people know that about me. So I'm going to keep it kind of academic.
Interesting. When did you start delving into the numbers so much where it sort of guided some of your philosophies?
I just saw it make sense. I don't like to live in the subjective world. I don't like to live in this sounds right or this looks right. Like, I need tangible evidence. I want the numbers. I want to see what statistically works better than other things, and just kind of go there, moneyball it.
And that does work. I mean, you can't argue with the number. Like, you look at it, and I think the big thing there then is getting the players to execute that, right? Or putting the people in the right spot. I feel like that's probably the translation you need, or to find how to, crack the right code to get that to happen on the field, I'd imagine.
Absolutely. And it doesn't always work. I mean, coaches still have a job. You have to feel things out. You have to, especially with women, I coach women's lacrosse, they feel everything. They'll feel your emotions or your pitfalls or your excitement. So you have to be, in tune with all of that as well. So I'm going to talk about that too.
Yeah, you've got plenty of experience doing that, of course, throughout your life and your career. I wanted to ask you a little bit while we have you here too, because you're the chair of the IWLCA's Racial Equity Task Force, correct? And
yes.
And you had a symposium of the IWLCA students of color recently. You delivered the closing remarks, and I was reading, I think, on US Lacrosse, a couple of quotes you had. And one you had on there that they put out from your closing remarks is, you have to have heart to be a black girl on a lacrosse field and then be brazen enough to stick with it. And I think there's a reason they used that quote, and obviously it stuck with me too. And you put that in a bigger context now. We obviously know you were talking to athletes at the time, but looking at what's happened in the world now, especially over the summer, of course, and the fight for equality, and then the dichotomy you had with that last week at the U.S. Capitol and sort of the response from law enforcement comparing to those protests. Then I look at that quote, and to me, that sticks with me there, too. It doesn't just apply to maybe a black lacrosse player that's a woman, but also maybe a black woman or a black person just in society. Do you see that parallel, and could you touch on that a little bit more?
Well, sports parallel society, and the inequities in sports also show themselves in lacrosse. So lacrosse is a sport that provides so much access and network and resources to people academically, socially, and not everyone has access to those things. And I have learned that over the course of my career, and just really what I'm speaking to is how to give more access to people, how to grow the game for everyone, but to give others that network and leg up into the real world, or into whatever society is out there. So the Racial and Equity Task Force has been a huge great thing that I've been asked to do, and I love it. I'm so fortunate to work with so many great people.
How much of a difference do you think having events like you had, that symposium, and be able to talk to some of these athletes and people is to sort of help them find their voice too and find their place and make them feel heard at the same time? That's got to be a big part of it all too, right?
Yeah, it's nice to see the impact that you have. I mean, I spoke to so many young women who were like, "Oh my gosh, Jessy," and I'm like, "Yeah, Jessy." Like, I don't know what you're talking about. But like, no, like I came to one of your clinics, or I saw you on a video somewhere, and I could see that it meant something to them, you know. And then in hearing that, it meant something to me that it's important that these women of color see other women of color in leadership positions. So that's why I try to take advantage of things like this, where other people can see us doing things in a positive light, you know, so that maybe one day they could see themselves doing it too.
And like you mentioned in that quote too, and sticking with it, right? I mean, there's going to be challenges and pitfalls, especially being a woman of color in a sport like this, where you are a big minority, right? And I think sticking with it is one of the things that really, going forward for the future, is so important too.
Yeah, I mean, the quote comes from wasn't necessarily the fastest or the strongest athlete that I knew, but I think anyone who knows me knows that I have the heart of a lion, and that's what a lot of marginalized people bring to the table. That, you know, think about the heart and the stick-to-itiveness that somebody has to be the only brown face for miles at a lacrosse tournament. Like, you know, that takes some gumption. So I try to talk about that and talk about, if you give this person an opportunity, how great it can be, what an impact it can be in their lives.
And you mentioned the parallels, and you look at everything that we saw over the summer when it came to the protests, and knowing that change wasn't going to happen in the blink of an eye. And I think you mentioned sticking to it on the field. I think there's a parallel there too, and sticking with it, as it's not going to happen in the blink of an eye, but if you continue to have these voices heard like you're amplifying, I think that's also that there's a parallel there too, right?
Yeah, we're going to ride this wave. I mean, things are happening. It's staying in everybody's forefront. You know, you can't get away from it. It's all over the news. Yeah. And a lot of times, if it's not in your face, you kind of are like, oh, well, it's not that important. But you know, my push is going to be everything that happens throughout the news, throughout society. I'm going to ride it to push my initiative in the sport of lacrosse.
Yeah, and it sounds like you've done an amazing job at that, you know, in your role, and that's really cool. And I think you need people like you know, in the society to help that and push that wave and ride the wave and start the wave a little bit too, because obviously you're a part of the wave at the same time, right?
Yes, I am the wave, and I'm also riding the wave.
It's all one thing.
Yes, no, it's great. We're doing really, really great things, and I just want other people to keep an ear out. You know, watch out for the things that are happening. The IWLCA is really leading the charge on a lot of you know, equality issues, which is great.
Yeah, I couldn't. That's what we need. I couldn't agree more. Jessy, you know what day you're presenting just yet?
The 15th. Oh my gosh! Don't let me tell you. They'll get so mad at me for not knowing. I know it's late. It's past my bedtime. It's like 8:30.
All right.
And I was like, wow, that's late. So the 15th at 8:30.
All right, we got it. Sign up. You want to learn about some defensive basics and learn about the analytics and numbers and how to get that on the field and the best out of your team.
You know, it's not going to be a monologue. I want it to be a dialogue. So I want people to bring their questions, bring their passion for the game, and, you know, we can bounce things off of each other. I really am here as a resource to help. I'm not coaching anymore, so this is all I have.
Yeah, and interact and get involved, I guess, is what you want from your people as well, and that's important. And you're still involved. I mean, come on, let's be honest.
I'm always involved, yeah.
Sounds like that's who you are, Jessy. We appreciate the time. Jessy Morgan, check out her on LaxCon, and we appreciate the time. Thank you so much, Jessy.
Thank you.